Adrian Lewis is the kind of son who smooths edges no one else sees. At 28, I've made a habit of stepping out of rooms before tempers climb. On the night my younger sister Maya married, I expected to play that familiar part smile in photos, make toasts, keep the peace. The ballroom glowed with candles. White linen softened every table, and a swing band braided cheerful notes through the chatter. My mother Eleanor floated from guest to guest like a crowned hostess. Compliments stuck to her the way glitter clings to fabric. She thrives on occasions like this. Programs aligned, flowers symmetrical, every detail whispering that we were a perfect family. I knew better, but I swallowed the thought. It was Maya's evening, and I wanted no shadows on her dress. I was lifting a glass when my phone hummed. The caller ID displayed my bank's name, expecting a routine verification or a congratulations text, masquerading as a fraud alert. I excused myself and drifted toward a quiet corridor near the service doors. I answered with a practiced calm. "Mr. Lewis," the man said, voice measured and courteous. "I'm Andrew Patel, branch manager. We've tried to reach you regarding an overdue payment on a personal loan attached to your profile. We haven't heard back." His tone carried the soft firmness of someone trained to deliver difficult information without raising it to a shout. I frowned. "I don't have a personal loan." The words left my mouth before I could decorate them with niceties. "Debt makes me uneasy. I budget, I save. I avoid credit I don't need." For a second, I wondered if my card had been skimmed or an account misfiled. There was a pause on his end, the rustle of paper, a keyboard tap. The application lists Adrian Lewis as borrower. Disbursements went to event vendors through a dedicated account labeled Maya Celebration. Co-signatory documentation references Eleanor Lewis as point of contact. He read my address and employer with surgical accuracy. The corridor seemed to tilt. Candlelight from the ballroom lapped at the wall like thin water. I steadied my breath. "You're saying a loan was opened in my name and used for my sister's wedding?" The syllables felt foreign, as if they belonged to someone less cautious than me. Mr. Patel didn't speculate, he summarized. Notices had been sent. The first payment was past due. Identity verification flags were now raised because my recent login history showed no acknowledgement. Memory sprinted ahead of me. Misplaced mail, a form my mother once asked me to sign for the caterer, my tendency to nod and keep the evening moving. I pictured Eleanor in the ballroom, flawless posture, a hand on someone's sleeve, the practiced laugh. My father Greg would be at a corner table checking the seating chart, grateful for quiet. Maya glowing, twirling the edge of her veil. "Mr. Lewis," the manager said gently, "we can route you to our fraud team now, or you can schedule a time tomorrow. I do need to note your acknowledgement of the account." I stared at the ceiling tiles until they stopped swimming. A familiar reflex step aside, keep the tide calm pressed against my ribs. It had always been easier to compromise than to confront. But this wasn't a late RSVP or a spilled centerpiece. This was my name, my future. I asked him to remain on the line while I verified a few details. He confirmed the vendor list, the amount, the date the funds were released. Each fact nested into the next with tidy inevitability. When he finished, I could still hear the band change keys, the room applauding an announcement I'd missed. I thanked him for his patience. "Please don't disconnect yet," I said, voice even. I slipped the phone into speaker mode and let it rest in my palm. The corridor smelled faintly of starch and roses. Through the open doorway, I watched my mother lift a crystal flute, her smile polished to a mirror shine. I straightened my tie, found my breath, and turned toward the light of the ballroom, carrying a truth that would not stay in the dark. I re-entered the ballroom with the phone in my hand, the screen still lit, Andrew Patel on speaker. The band was between numbers, the sax player testing a note, while the drummer rotated a brush across the snare like a soft rain. Candles brightened the silverware, and servers ghosted between tables with plates of salmon balanced like choreography. Nothing in the room suggested emergency. Nothing in the room suggested my life had just been split into a before and after. My mother Eleanor was halfway through a story at the head table, her palm hovering in the air, as if she were conducting a private orchestra. She looked up when she saw me walking straight toward her. Something in my face must have betrayed the gravity, because the smile that usually snapped on like a switch hesitated. My father Greg followed her gaze, then returned his eyes to the seating chart as if stubborn concentration could will the evening back on script. I stopped just short of the dais. "Mom," I said evenly, "I need to speak with you and Dad. Now." The nearest guests quieted by instinct as if someone had dimmed the volume on a remote. My sister Maya, radiant in satin, leaned forward, veil catching the light. "Adrian, is everything okay?" I didn't answer her. "Not yet." I lifted the phone enough that the small speaker projected. Mr. Lewis Andrew said, his tone composed, "I'm still on the line. Would you like me to hold while you confer?" Eleanor's eyes flashed. "Adrian, put that away." The words slid out with a smoothness I knew too well, the register she used for waitstaff and contractors, the one where every sentence was a polished command. "We can discuss whatever this is after the toasts." "It is about the toasts," I replied, surprising myself with how steady the words sounded. "About who's paying for tonight. About how." A hush settled like a sheet. On the far side of the room, the wedding planner paused near the cake, a hand still cupped around a walkie-talkie. Someone laughed at another table, an echo from a moment earlier, then stopped mid-breath. Greg gave a small, embarrassed chuckle that didn't reach his eyes. "Son, don't be dramatic. Your mother has every detail under control." "I'm sure she does," I said, including opening a loan in my name to fund Maya's celebration. I let the label land between us. The words didn't explode. They threaded the air more quietly than I expected, yet I felt them change the room's oxygen. A ripple traveled outward, heads turning, shoulders, straightening, forks set down a fraction too carefully. Eleanor's chin lifted as if bracing for a photograph. "Adrian," she said softly, warningly, "this is not appropriate." Andrew's voice, crisp and undeniably real, spilled into the silence. For transparency, he said, "I can confirm I'm the branch manager with Fairmont Savings, and I am speaking to Adrian Lewis regarding an overdue payment on a personal loan associated with disbursements to multiple vendors this evening. I am not at liberty to share vendor names aloud, but—" "That's enough." Eleanor snapped the first clean crack in her composure. She reached across the table and touched the tips of her fingers to my wrist. Not a caress, not yet a grab, more like a proprietary tap that said, "This belongs to me. Turn it off." I drew my hand back. No. You could hear the room noticing the word, how short it was, how unused to our family's script. Maya's lips parted. Greg's neck reddened above his collar. "Adrian," Maya said, her voice pitched low to keep it from shaking, "please. Not tonight. Whatever misunderstanding you have, we can fix it tomorrow." "Don't," she swallowed. "Do not do this here." Misunderstanding. The word felt like an insult offered in pretty wrapping. "Did you know I asked her?" I kept my voice quiet enough that I wasn't shouting loud enough that there would be no confusion. "Did you know a loan was opened in my name to pay for this?" Her eyes flicked first to Eleanor, then to her new husband Ethan, whose fork hovered in air like he'd forgotten how to use it. She didn't answer. Silence is its own kind of confession. I felt it more than heard it. Greg shifted his chair back and leaned toward me, elbows on knees, the posture of a coach calling time out. "Son," he murmured, "lower your voice. You will embarrass your sister." "I'm trying to keep my life from being collateral," I said. "Embarrassment is a petty fee compared to the interest I'll be paying on a debt I never chose." The drummer stopped feathering the snare. The bandleader glanced to the planner. The planner lifted her palms in a small, helpless shrug. People weren't eating anymore. They were listening the way water listens to gravity. Eleanor straightened to her full height, which had always seemed taller because of the authority she wrapped around it. "We did what was necessary for this family," she said. "For once, could you be grateful your sister deserves a perfect day? You are fortunate enough to help make that possible." I might have laughed another day. Tonight it arrived like a cough of air without humor. Grateful, I repeated. For identity theft. For the privilege of offering my credit score to your altar of appearances. "Watch your tone," she said. The phrases were a choreography we'd danced for years. "Watch your tone. Don't make a scene. We will talk at home." But the home we would talk in later would be purchased someday with money I hadn't wanted to borrow. The thought pulled something firm and cold into place inside me. Mr. Lewis Andrews said, still patient, "I can connect you to our fraud unit. If you confirm you did not authorize the account, we will suspend activity and open an investigation. We can also issue vendor holds. I want to be clear, we can proceed now or schedule for tomorrow morning. I simply need your affirmation." A low buzz ran through the guests, whisper meeting whisper like wires humming. I looked at Eleanor. "Do you want to explain?" I asked, "or should I?" "Adrian." She said my name like a verdict. Put the phone down. "Explain," I repeated. Her mask tried to reform, but the edges wouldn't fuse. "We've carried you through more than you realize," she said too carefully. "We paid for your summer programs, your lease, when you were between jobs. Families balance resources. This is not theft. This is stewardship." I felt heat rise in me. Anger, yes, but also a quieter grief that had been waiting for a microphone. "When I was between jobs, I said I asked to pay you back. You told me my thanks was enough. What you wanted wasn't repayment, it was leverage." Aunt Rosa, who'd been sitting 2 tables over, pressed a hand to her chest. "Eleanor," she said, not quite standing. "What is Otter? What is he talking about?" Eleanor's eyes cut toward her sister and then back to me, a calculation flipping through the abacus. I could feel people choosing sides in their heads, diagramming alliances, rehearsing versions for future retellings. The wedding planner took 2 steps closer and stopped, deciding there was nothing a fresh boutonniere could fix. Maya leaned in, her voice a tremble threaded with plea. "Adrian, please, don't turn this into a trial. It's my wedding." It became a trial when my name was forged on the evidence I said. The consonants clicked in my mouth. I begged to stay out of debt for the next decade. I saved to avoid exactly this. And now my future is a line item on your event budget. Ethan cleared his throat, searching for a middle. "Maybe there's been a mix-up," he offered weakly. "Maybe an accountant used the wrong file." Andrew cut in with the politeness of a scalpel. "Sir, the application includes government ID numbers and employer details that would not be available to an accountant without direct access. It also includes a co-signature referencing Eleanor Lewis as contact." Ethan folded eyes, dropping to his plate. The room had the smell of candles starting to smoke. Greg tried again, voice low and fatherly, the way he'd say my name when I was 11 and refusing to pass the ball. "Adrian, enough. Your mother worked tirelessly to make tonight beautiful. You will not ruin it with the truth," I said. That landed harder than I expected. Greg flinched, not much, but enough, and I wondered whether even he believed his own line anymore. Eleanor's hand shot out this time and closed around my wrist grip tight enough that the skin protested. Her nails bit crescents I would find later. "You are not doing this here," she whispered, teeth barely apart. "Put the phone away." I withdrew my arm, and with it whatever permission she once had to choreograph me. The motion felt small, but an old magnet released. I lifted the phone a fraction higher, letting the light of the screen reflect in the crystal flutes. For those wondering, I said, not shouting but giving my voice room to travel. My bank called during dinner. A loan I did not authorize was opened in my name, the funds paid for tonight. A wave of air moved through the hall. Not gasps, not yet, but the sound people make when the floor rearranges its boards under their feet. Someone dropped a fork and it pinged like punctuation. Eleanor turned to the room with the speed of a practiced actress pivoting to a new audience. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began control, clicking back on, "there has been a misunderstanding and Mr. Lewis," Andrew said from my palm, "please confirm whether you authorize an investigation." I didn't answer him immediately. I looked at Maya because I needed to know whether she was a bystander or a beneficiary, whether this was complicity or oblivion. "Did you sign anything?" I asked her softly. "Did you know she did?" Maya's face worked around words that didn't commit to arrival. Her eyes glassed, her mouth opened and closed, a tide unable to decide. She glanced again at Eleanor, who gave a tiny shake of her head. "No, not now, not here," a gesture that used to keep me quiet too. Maya's shoulders sank. She said nothing, and that nothing spoke. I inhaled the candle smoke and roses and stainless steel and all the perfume in the room designed to smell like other flowers. I could hear a child somewhere asking a parent what was happening and being shushed. The bandleader's hand hovered above the music stand, waiting for a signal that wouldn't come. I turned my head toward Greg. "Dad, I need you to say out loud that what happened is wrong." He blinked at me, a man who'd trained himself to survive by ducking. His mouth moved, forming a sentence I could have scripted. "We will handle it privately," he said. "We will make it right." "That is not the same as wrong," I replied. It's strange how the simplest words can separate weather systems. Wrong, right, 2 doors that lead to different houses. A tremor rippled through Greg's jaw. For a second, I saw the younger version of him, the one who might have once thrown a punch in a parking lot for less. Then the older version closed the door and bolted it. "Lower your voice," he said. Eleanor took her chance, stepping into his shadow. "Apologize to your sister," she commanded. "Then sit down. You will not humiliate this family." I thought of all the times she'd used family as a word that meant her. I thought of the afternoons when I said, "Sure, I can swing by," and how that converted into, "Of course, you'll fix it for us." The calculus had been so automatic I hadn't noticed the sum until it presented itself as a debt with interest. I faced her squarely. "You already did that," I said. "You humiliated this family the moment you decided the perfect photo mattered more than my signature." Eleanor's eyes widened, not because she hadn't expected resistance, but because she hadn't envisioned a version where resistance had substance. She opened her mouth to answer, but had to close it without words, like a diver reconsidering the depth. The room, which had been holding itself at the edge of its seat, leaned forward. In a different life, I would have backed up a step and offered a saving joke, drained tension with a smile I didn't feel. In this life, in this minute, I stood still. Andrew, faithful and professional to the script of my new life, spoke again. "Mr. Lewis, I'll repeat my options. We can initiate a fraud case now with your confirmation and place holds. Or we can schedule a call for tomorrow morning. If you decline either, I will document that you've been notified." A cousin I hadn't spoken to in months whispered "Holy," and stopped before the last syllable. Across the aisle, an older relative shook his head with a sigh that said tradition had been disrupted and he needed a softer chair. Maya's hand found the edge of the tablecloth, gathering it like she could hide behind fabric. "Adrian," she whispered, "I didn't ask for this. I just wanted one day." I believed her, which is different from excusing her. The wanting was true. The cost was too. I lifted the phone a little higher, and with it, the responsibility that had been mine all along. "Andrew," I said, and my voice didn't shake hold for 30 seconds. "As you wish," he said promptly. I let the phone hang at my side for those 30 seconds, and looked at the three people who had taught me most of what I knew about love and loyalty and their counterfeits. "Here is what is going to happen," I said quietly to Eleanor and Greg, but loudly enough that the nearest tables could hear, because secrets had produced this mess, and light is a disinfectant. "You will acknowledge now that a loan was opened in my name without my consent. You will say it is wrong. You will commit to cooperating fully with the bank to unwind it." Eleanor stared at me as if she'd been asked to eat fire. "I will not participate in your theatrics." "It's not theater," I said, "it's accounting." Greg rubbed his temples and sighed. "Fine," he muttered. "Fine. It was a mistake." "Not a mistake," I corrected, "a choice. Words matter. Tonight they matter more than you know." Maya made a small sound, something between a sob and an apology, and for a heartbeat, I considered stepping toward her. But compassion without boundaries is just another way to say yes to being harmed, and I had finally learned that vocabulary. The 30 seconds elapsed, and Andrew, precise as a metronome, returned. "Mr. Lewis," I exhaled. "I'm here. Would you like me to connect the fraud team and place holds?" The planner looked toward the doors, perhaps calculating guest exits, and how to shepherd a reception out of the path of a storm. A child somewhere began to cry softly, lulled by a parent's whisper. The candles guttered and recovered. I glanced once more at my family, noting every expression the way you note the furniture you will leave behind. "Andrew," I said, "connect us." A murmur rose. Shock, approval, disapproval, fascination. The room was a chorus without rehearsal. Eleanor made a small involuntary motion toward me, the last reflex of control, then let her hand fall to her side as if even gravity had stopped taking her calls. Andrew's voice shifted into a tone I recognized from customer service flowcharts. "Very well. I'm initiating a warm transfer to our fraud investigations unit. While I do, please be advised that vendor disbursements may be paused pending review. You may hear a click." "Understood," I said. I didn't look away from Eleanor as the line clicked. I wanted her to know that the sound wasn't a threat. It was an answer. I wanted her to hear, maybe for the first time, that boundaries can be music. In the 2-second gap before the next voice came on, the ballroom existed in a strange equilibrium, future, advancing past, refusing to retreat, present stretched thin between them. Guests shifted, uncertain whether to stand, whether to drink, whether to pretend they were not watching a family rearrange its furniture in public. The new voice arrived, measured, legal, ordinary. This is fraud prevention, Mr. Lewis. Can you verify your date of birth? I did. The words felt like keys in locks I had been told were jammed. Thank you. Do you confirm that you did not open the loan ending in 47 and did not authorize any party to do so on your behalf? I confirm. Do you consent to a formal investigation and to the placement of temporary holds on associated outflows? I do. I didn't add the rest out loud that this was my first vow of the evening that belonged to me. The agent continued instructing me about next steps, what documentation to expect, what timelines, all the architecture of a process designed to restore what should never have been stolen. I answered each question. When we paused, I lifted my eyes and found Eleanor's. She was still beautiful. Grief can make anyone stately. For a moment, I felt the old pull, the wish to rescue, to rewrite, to smooth. Then I remembered how smoothing is another word for erasing. I ended the call with the promise of an email and the assurance that the account would be frozen pending review. The band had not resumed. The hall was a held breath. I slid the phone into my pocket and addressed the room without raising my glass or my voice. We'll figure out what this means for the rest of the evening, I said. I don't know yet. I'm sorry for the disruption. I didn't apologize for telling the truth. Then I turned back to the people who had written the first chapters of me. We had a script, I said to Eleanor almost gently. I was supposed to be the quiet one. But quiet is not the same as complicit. Something in her face shifted pain, certainly, but something like comprehension, too, as if she'd finally found the end of a sentence she'd been pretending to understand. She opened her mouth. I waited to see whether it would be an apology or a performance. The band leader misreading the silence as Invitation lifted his hand to start the next song. He didn't play. No one did. The story had changed key, and we were all for a breath learning the notes. And with that, the evening tilted toward whatever would come next. The fraud investigator's voice steadied the air like a spirit level laid across a crooked table. Mr. Lewis, my name is Sophia Chen from Fraud Prevention. I'll ask a few verification questions and outline next steps. I answered them, date of birth, address, last 4 digits, employer. Each reply felt like a key turning. Around us, the ballroom held its breath. The band waited with their instruments at parade rest. A busboy froze with a stack of dessert plates, unsure whether to advance or retreat. Thank you, Sophia said. I've placed a temporary hold on outflows from the loan account. We'll need a signed affidavit from you tonight or first thing in the morning. I'll email a secure link. Once we have your statement, we'll notify the cosigner and any parties listed as contacts that the account is under investigation. Her phrasing landed like stones dropped into deep water. Notify the cosigner. Listed contacts. Investigation. Eleanor sat very straight, chin tipped, as if to keep a crown from sliding. This is ridiculous, she announced to the table nearest her, then to everyone else within earshot. No one is investigating anything. We will settle it internally. Sophia's voice, perfectly courteous, did not belong to the room's hierarchy. For clarity, the bank, not private parties, controls the investigation, ma'am. We will contact all required individuals. A tiny muscle fluttered at the corner of Eleanor's eye. Greg rubbed his brow, aligning his napkin with military precision. Maya clutched the edge of the tablecloth like a lifeline, knuckles pale against satin. Mr. Lewis, Sophia continued. Do you consent to receive documents electronically? Yes. Do you confirm you did not authorize anyone to open or sign for the loan on your behalf? I confirm. Understood. This call is recorded. I felt a dozen gazes circle that sentence like carrion birds around a bright object. Recorded. A word with teeth. From 2 tables over, Aunt Rosa stood halfway, then thought better of making a scene and settled for volume instead. Eleanor, she called, voice unexpectedly clear. If what he's saying is true, you must apologize. Now. Eleanor didn't look at her. She looked at me, at my phone, at my mouth, as if the syllables themselves were betrayals. Adrian, she said evenly, you will stop this. You will deactivate the speaker. You will sit down. She had turned commands into lullabies for years. They used to work. Tonight, they didn't even land. Ms. Chen. I said if I sign the affidavit tonight, what happens to current vendor payments? Disbursements are paused pending review. Any vendor attempting to process new charges will receive a decline code. If a vendor insists on immediate payment, they may request an alternate source. The wedding planner's eyes widened a fractional degree the way professionals react to earthquakes, measure first, then move. She touched the walkie-talkie at her hip but didn't speak into it. A server unsure of protocol set down a tray and stepped backward like leaving a shrine. Eleanor exhaled a laugh with no humor in it. "You're going to ruin your sister's reception because you can't be generous for one day. I'm going to stop being an account you can draw from without permission," I replied. Greg leaned toward me, voice pitched low, almost gentle. "Son, you're angry." "Rightly so. But there are guests." "There's a crime," I said. The words skated across the parquet and came back heavier. Crime. It sounded dramatic and simple at once, as clear and ugly as broken glass. In the back of the room, someone whispered, "He said crime like a play-by-play." Mr. Lewis Sophia said, "I've emailed the link. If you complete it within the hour, we can issue formal notices this evening." "I'll do it." "Thank you. Do you have any questions?" 100, none useful. "Not now." "Then for the record, we will proceed." The line clicked. The ballroom didn't move. I slid the phone into my pocket and faced my family like a man bumped onto a stage by a crowd he never asked to entertain. Eleanor Aunt Rosa said again, softer now, "Tell the truth." Eleanor allowed herself to blink a slow concession. "I organized financing," she said, "because families help one another. Because this day mattered." "You used my name," I said. She chose each word as if it might stain her dress. "I expedited what you would have done if you weren't so rigid." Maya let out a small sound. A cracked harmony of plea and shame. "Mom." "Not now," Eleanor clipped her hand, slicing the air to cut off dissent, the way a maitre d' dismisses a clumsy busboy. The movement drew new attention to us from the far tables. They leaned, they pretended to look away. They assembled the evening like a puzzle they would later retell at brunch. The cake stood witness across the room, tiers of sugar architecture, pretending neutrality. Greg tried to broker a truce with an old refrain. "Let's take this outside." "Why?" I asked. "So the truth can suffocate where no one sees it." His face folded into hurt he hadn't planned to feel. "Adrian." I asked for one thing, I said, trying to hold my voice steady, permission to own my name. To own my future. Maya scrubbed a tear with the heel of her hand. We thought she stopped, corrected herself. I thought it was under control. That Mom had a plan. I looked at her. I wanted to let those words absolve her because I loved the kid sister in her memory. The one who used to sit on the stairs listening to my high school band practice and clap too loud when we were terrible. But grown choices were not a child's applause. "Under control," I repeated, meaning hidden. The wedding planner appeared at my elbow with a professional smile lacquered over worry. "Pardon me, Mr. Lewis," she whispered. "I'm getting vendor alerts. 2 charges declined. Should we redirect billing to another card?" Her question was exquisitely neutral. She didn't say your mother's card or your father's or your own. She said another card, the floating plank you offer to anyone on a sinking ship. "No," I said. "Please pause any new charges until this is resolved." She nodded, grateful for instruction, even if it complicated her schedule, and slipped away like a nurse leaving a bedside with orders in hand. A scrape of chair legs carried from the front row. A man stood up with effort that was not theatrical. Arthur Hale. My mother's father wore a tie that looked older than most people in the room. He was light on his feet for someone who had been on the planet long enough to watch presidents turn into trivia questions. When he spoke, he didn't raise his voice yet. Everyone heard him. "Eleanor," he said, and in his mouth the name sounded like the full story of her life. "Did you sign anything with Adrian's name on it?" Silence has temperatures. The one that fell then was cold enough to fog a glass. Eleanor's posture softened by a degree no one else would have noticed if they hadn't been staring. "Daddy," she said, summoning a younger register, the one with soft edges and practiced innocence. "This is a misunderstanding." Arthur did not blink. "Did you sign anything with his name on it?" Her eyes slid towards the centerpieces, toward the chandelier, toward a future that wanted to be the past. "I facilitated the process." Rosa exhaled like someone had punched her. Greg's jaw clenched. Maya shut her eyes. Arthur nodded once more, judge then grandfather. "Then you will apologize to the boy." A tremor ran through Eleanor's mouth. "I will not be spoken to like a child," she said, but the sentence bent in the middle. "I did what was necessary." "What was easiest?" Arthur corrected. "Necessary is when a house is on fire and you carry someone out. Easier is when you build the fire and ask someone else to pay for the water." Murmurs stirred, a low weather moving across tablecloths. For once, Eleanor had no sentence ready. She swallowed. Greg put a hand on her forearm, an instinct to steady a ship taking on water. "We will fix it." he told Arthur, addressing the air because he couldn't bear the weight of any one pair of eyes. "We'll pay it back." Arthur's focus did not shift. Paying back is not the same as telling the truth. He turned those same clear eyes to me. "Adrian, are you safe?" I hadn't expected that question. It pierced places the rest of the evening had only bruised. "Yes," I said, because he meant something larger than money. He looked satisfied with the answer, but not with the evening. He returned to his chair like a verdict delivered. Eleanor's voice reemerged, roughened. "I did not steal from you," she told me. "I leveraged a resource for the family." "People are not resources," I said. "Names are not assets you can assign to your projects. My life isn't a budget line under events." Maya reached for me, then pulled her hand back, unsure which side of the line she belonged on. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I should have asked questions." I nodded. It wasn't forgiveness. It was an acknowledgement that questions would have been the map out of this forest. The room tried to decide whether to resume its regularly scheduled programming. A cousin coughed. The bandleader adjusted his sheet music just to make a sound that wasn't a sigh. I pulled out my phone again, opened the email from the bank, and completed the affidavit on the spot. The form asked me to declare under penalty of perjury that I had not authorized the loan, that I had not benefited from the proceeds. I signed with my finger. It felt almost medicinal, like stitching a wound you can't yet see the size of. When I hit submit, the confirmation screen bloomed. Received. Case opened. A soft buzz announced an incoming message: account frozen. Notices sent. Sophia's number flashed back across the top of the screen for a second, then disappeared. A new banner appeared. Vendor decline notice, followed by another and another, as if the logistics of the evening had decided to write their own frenetic epilogue. I raised my head. "I've signed. It's official." Eleanor's shoulders rose and fell. She looked smaller, but not gentler. "You've humiliated us," she said. "You've humiliated me." "You did that when you signed," I said, not unkindly. "I am only refusing to carry it alone." Rosa wiped her eyes. "He's right," she told the room like a benediction. "He's right." Greg stared at his hands, at the gold band he'd spun through every argument my parents ever had. "I never wanted this," he said to no one in particular. "None of us did," I said, "but wanting and choosing are not the same." Maya breathed in, breathed out, lifted her face. "I'll talk to the vendors," she said hoarsely to the planner, who materialized like a helpful ghost. We'll figure out something." It was the first sentence she'd owned all night. The planner nodded, grateful to have a task with verbs. She turned, then hesitated. "Should we continue?" she asked the air. No one had an answer. Arthur tapped his cane lightly against the floor, not as a threat, but as punctuation. "The celebration can wait," he said. "Responsibility cannot." It was the kind of line people would quote later as evidence of wisdom. It also happened to be true. A server approached with coffee and retreated when he saw the tableau had no cups for peace offerings. The candles had burned half an inch lower. Time, unfazed by ceremony, continued. Eleanor stood, pressing her palms to the table's edge, as if she could push the night back into shape. The diamonds at her ears looked heavier than usual. She scanned the room the way a commander measures a battlefield after the order that cannot be unsaid. Then she said something I had never heard her say to me in 28 years. "I'm sorry," she managed. The word came out in two pieces that didn't want to touch. "I shouldn't have signed." The room didn't applaud. This wasn't a play. But I felt something unclench, some tiny hinge inside us creak toward a direction it had forgotten existed. "Thank you," I said. I did not tell her it was enough. She sank back into her chair. Greg put his hand on hers. She didn't move it away. A text dropped onto my screen like a pebble into a pond. "Case number I saw issued. A detective may contact you." The language was dry and final. Somewhere outside, a car passed, tires hushing over wet pavement. The night had edges again. The bandleader looked to me. I gave a small shake of my head. He stayed still. We stood inside a silence that no longer felt like a stranglehold, but like the space where something else could grow consequence, maybe, or the long math of repair. My phone lit again. A new number. No name. The preview line read, "Financial Crimes Unit Follow-Up." I looked at my family, at the guests who had witnessed more truth than their suits had been promised, at my grandfather with his steady eyes. The next chapter was arriving, polite and official. I answered. "Mr. Lewis, Detective Laura Reyes, Financial Crimes Unit." the voice said, calm, clipped, capable. I'm reviewing the bank's referral. Are you in a safe place? Yes, I answered. The ballroom, for all its crystal and flowers, felt like a courtroom with soft lighting. Is the alleged cosigner Eleanor Lewis present? She's here. Copy. Please preserve any documents you can: emails, texts, vendor invoices. Do not confront further. I can dispatch officers to take statements tonight. Are you willing to provide a recorded statement now to memorialize the timeline? Yes. Begin when ready. I faced the far wall away from the tables and walked her through the evening call from Andrew Patel, the verification, the vendor label, Maya's celebration, the pauses, the silences that said more than the sentences. I kept my voice even. The words felt like scaffolding being built under a collapsing roof. Thank you, Detective Reyes said when I finished. Officers are en route. When they arrive, they may ask Ms. Lewis to accompany them to the station for formal questioning. You will be contacted for follow-up. Do you have any questions? Only the kind that don't have answers. No. We ended the call. I turned back to the room. The band had put down their instruments, hands folded in collective prayer for a cue that wouldn't come. Arthur watched me like a lighthouse watches a ship that finally trusts the beam. A thin hush carried to the doors. 2 plainclothes officers and 1 uniformed arrived, moving through the murmurs with the steady gait of people who do not borrow urgency they do not need. The uniformed officer spoke to the planner first, quiet, courteous, then approached our table. Ms. Eleanor Lewis, he said, tone neutral. Eleanor rose as if the floor might stain her dress. Yes, she answered, chin high. I'm Officer Nguyen. This is Detective Reyes. He gestured to a woman with a leather notebook and Officer Martinez. We're here to take preliminary statements regarding a reported identity theft incident. You are not under arrest at this moment. We would like you to accompany us for questioning. You are free to decline, but we will need to note your refusal. Refusal? A word Eleanor had been allergic to since I was a child. Greg cleared his throat, trying to become a wall. Is this necessary? This is my daughter's wedding. Detective Reyes met his eyes without heat. What's necessary is that we secure accounts and testimony while details are fresh, sir. Eleanor's gaze slid over the crowd, then back to me, then down to the place card that bore her name in calligraphy. She smoothed it like she could iron the night flat. I will cooperate, she said. The sentence wobbled but did not fall. Thank you, Reyes replied. We'll begin with Ms. Lewis. Mr. Lewis will take your statement here. Ms. Maya Lewis Carter. Mr. Greg Lewis, we may need to speak with you after. Reyes guided my mother a few steps away, just outside the radius of centerpieces and opinions. I watched the conversation from a respectful distance. She took out her pen, asked questions with the patience of a metronome. At one point, Eleanor pressed her lips together so hard I thought the lipstick would crack. At another, she touched her earlobe like checking for a pulse. Beside me, Maya whispered, I'm sorry. Not for the first time tonight, but this time the words arrived with their own weight. I should have asked where the money came from. I didn't want to. That's on me. I swallowed. Wanting the day doesn't make you a villain, I said. Closing your eyes does. She nodded, tears gathering without falling. Can we talk next week? Just us? Yes, I said. But I'll be honest. If you want me back in your life, the entrance fee is truth. Okay, she whispered. Truth. Across the room, a guest tried to start applause for courage or closure or habit. It died after 4 claps, embarrassed. The planner, professional to the end, approached the mic and with a soft steadiness that felt like mercy announced the reception would pause for a while. People stood, then sat, then drifted toward coffee as if caffeine could annotate the evening. Officer Nguyen took my statement at a side table. The questions were precise: what time, which words, who heard. I answered. He recorded. My signature landed on another page that claimed to know me. When they finished with Eleanor, the officers thanked her for cooperating. No cuffs, no spectacle. Consequences don't need choreography to be real. Still, when she walked past me toward the exit with Detective Reyes, something inside my chest unspooled, grief braided to relief. She paused just briefly and turned. Adrian. She said my name small for once. I will fix this. I hope you do, I replied. But fixing and owning aren't synonyms. She nodded once, a gesture that almost contained humility, and followed the officers out through the hush of 100 eyes. Arthur reached for my hand and squeezed with a strength that belied the tremor. The hard part isn't choosing truth, he said. It's keeping it when the room empties. I know, I said. I didn't, not fully, but I would. The week that followed taught me the vocabulary of restoration. Emails and affidavits. Freeze orders and reversal codes. Sophia Chen called twice to walk me through a process map that sounded like a foreign language, until it became my own. The bank reversed the loan, then flagged my file to keep future sharks from circling. My credit score rose like a shy animal coaxed from hiding. Eleanor met me at this bank with her attorney, and to her credit, without mascara. She signed the statements. She didn't look at me much, but when she did, the gaze held. "I'm sorry," she said, clearer than before. "No qualifiers." "No qualifiers," I repeated, and let the words sit where apology ends and amends begin. Greg texted me long messages about intention and pressure and how men of his generation were taught to solve quiet inside the house. I replied with boundaries and meeting times and a refusal to translate adulthood into excuses. He agreed to meet a counselor. Progress, like interest, compounds. Maya kept her word. We sat on a bench by the river and watched rowers split the water into tidy lanes. She gave me the list of vendors she'd call herself the payment plan she and Ethan had drafted without consulting our mother, the small, fierce decision to own the bill for the picture she wanted. "You don't have to forgive me today," she said. "Just watch me be different." I said I would. The wedding photos arrived in the family chat 2 weeks later. In one of them, I'm in the background, head turned, listening to a phone I can't quite hear in a still image. It is not a perfect picture. Maybe that's why I saved it. On a quiet Thursday night, I cooked pasta, opened the window, and ate at my small table. The apartment didn't feel borrowed anymore. The silence wasn't a verdict. It was room. I raised a glass of water to no one in particular, and to everyone who had taught me how to speak. My phone buzzed. A message from Arthur, proud of you. The bridge you burned was to a place you couldn't live. I smiled. Not triumph, something steadier. A new term agreed to by me. I washed the dishes, dried, the pan, turned off the light, and slept. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. I'll see you next time as we continue exploring more journeys and lessons together.